So it looks like Nintendo has been victim to a huge leak, a big one, source code, design files for a bunch of older consoles, not just the Wii, but the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube. This is pretty big. A lot of people don't quite understand that. Some people are like, who cares? These are old systems. But at the same time, it's a problem for Nintendo in a sense. And there's some things going on out there that people have been discussing, and I want to kind of comment on some of that. People are saying, well, what can we use this information for? What does this mean for emulation and FPGA implementation of these consoles from Nintendo? That could be interesting, but could also be a little concerning at the same time, because we know how Nintendo gets, right? So looking at this article on Nintendo Everything, it seems like the same article is mirrored on tons of websites. So wherever you look at this article, it's going to be apparently the same stuff. But here they're stating there was an earlier leak with Pokemon stuff, and that came out, design files from the Generation 2 era, sprites, a bunch of other assets. And then this stuff came out, and it's apparently part of a larger leak. So we'll have to wait and see what else comes out from this. But it looks like this leak was, it's being attributed to the hack on Broadon, which was a company that Nintendo worked with for developing the Wii hardware and software. And then they list a bunch of stuff that is apparently in this leak. Source code for Boot 012, block diagram data sheets for every component, and Verilog. Verilog is a hardware description language. This is one of the biggest things that people have been talking about. It's used to describe circuits via code. So with this, we can learn how every single piece of the Wii was made. That is pretty crazy stuff, right? Full iOS SDK, source code for iOS. iOS is the Wii operating system. Planning docs for implementation of the system from 2004 to 2006. The list goes on and on. GameCube and iQue content, internal GameCube docs, including physical disk layout, massive 2 gigabyte plus iQue dump, including full CVS for that as well. And then there's a bunch of like tech demo type stuff that came out for the Nintendo 64 that have been shown. Just weird little things, kind of interesting to see. I know a lot of people into preservation really dig this kind of stuff. I mean, do these things need to be preserved? If they're out there, why the hell not? But they're just tech demos in a sense. Little morph demo. I thought that one was kind of neat. This little stupid morph face thing, like really screams freaking late 90s. The face morph action. New Snake. I don't know what this one is. Like just like Snake, I guess, eating a little pellets. Just all little tech demos. What is this one? Title Rec 2D. Just scanning around like a panoramic image, it looks like. This might be another one. Very similar thing. Yeah, just moving around images. That one's kind of cool. The Earth. Block Monkey. The hell is Block Monkey? Just a bunch of blocks. Just little tech demos. Interesting things. A demo puzzle. Like, okay, move it around, make the image. These were just tech demos, right? But the interesting thing with this stuff is I've seen a lot of people, like I said, talking about FPGA implementation, emulation. Like this could really help with that kind of stuff. And while that may be true, it could be a very iffy thing. I'm no expert in any of this stuff. Half of the shit that's listed on this leak, I don't know what the hell it means, to be honest with you. But I do find it interesting on that front of like, will this benefit emulation and FPGA implementation? Creating an FPGA Nintendo 64 could be huge, right? Get that on Mr. Project. Somebody could make a FPGA freaking Nintendo 64 analog, could pop one out. Who knows, right? But the problem with that is that this source code was leaked illegally. It's not open source. It's not just out there for the public to freely see and use to whatever they will, right? This is Nintendo's, property that they did not want available to the public, hence why it's a leak, right? So the problem with that is if you use Nintendo's source code to create something, now it's the Wild West with a lot of this stuff, right? So shit could happen. Doesn't really matter. Somebody could use this to create better emulators, to create an FPGA implementation anonymously. Who knows how that would all work out? But part of it, with it not being, a legally obtained source that Nintendo wanted out there, is that if it is used for implementation of those things and Nintendo finds out through looking at your code, then there could be legal repercussions because you can't use source code that's not open source for the purpose of like reverse engineering something and creating an implementation from it. So that could be a problem. And I'm sure the people who are involved in these kind of things, they know that. I'm sure, like, just like I said, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but just thinking about it, like there could be somebody who's deeply involved in emulation or FPGA implementation, has all this information. They're not letting anybody know that they've even heard of this hack or this leak, right? So that could be a possibility. And then they use this stuff to create their own implementation without actually using the source code. They learn from it, right? And that's the other part too, is that if you use the source code to figure things out and then implement it yourself without using the source code, I mean, that could be an iffy thing too. Like, especially if you advertise, like, hey, I got the source code, I'm going to learn from it and then create my own implementation from it without actually using any of that code. If that's advertised, that's what I'm saying. Like maybe somebody underground keeping themselves out of it could utilize this in a different way. But if somebody's very upfront and like, yeah, I'm using this, and then they put a program out there, here comes Nintendo's ninjas with the cease and desist. So I was looking into this a little more, like clean room design. I've heard this quite a bit, and being in school in the past, my knowledge is very out of date, to be honest, but I did go to school for software engineering way back. Do I remember any of it? I don't know. I probably got hit upside the head a few too many times. Too many beers. But my knowledge is very out of date. But I know what clean room design is. So this is a term I've been seeing thrown around quite a bit lately concerning this kind of stuff. So clean room design, it's a method of copying a design by reverse engineering and then recreating it without infringing any of the copyrights associated with the original design. Clean room design is useful as a defense against copyright infringement because it relies on independent creation. However, because independent invention is not a defense against patents, clean room designs typically cannot be used to circumvent patent restrictions. So it's still a very, iffy thing on how you go about doing some of this stuff. The term implies that the design team works in an environment that is clean or demonstrably uncontaminated by any knowledge of the proprietary techniques used by the competitor, right? So if you're like, okay, we're going to design a Nintendo 64 FPGA or emulator, but we can't have any knowledge from what Nintendo's done from their source codes that are out there, because then you're contaminating that workflow. You're contaminating the knowledge. You're now using something that you're illegally not allowed to create this. So that's one thing to keep in mind with that. All very interesting things, in my opinion. I'm really curious to see what else leaks out there. But like I said, one of the biggest things is Nintendo and their Nintendo ninjas, shutting down emulation sites. They have every right to. I know some of us get upset with those things, and I get it. But Nintendo has every right to shut down that kind of stuff. But some things that you would think they should be a little more open about, like fan art, games and stuff like that, they are very quick to jump on it and say, no, enough is enough. Like they haven't embraced things like Sega has, for example, with fan games and whatnot. So it's a weird thing. Will this source code be used to benefit the retro gaming scene in the sense of preservation, which is a whole other topic, because emulating games isn't necessarily preservation, because I do see a lot of people say, well, I'm all about preserving games, when in fact, no, you're about playing games for free, right? Like there's a differentiation there. That's a topic for a whole other time, but it'd be very interesting to see how this comes to benefit the retro gaming community as far as those things go, preservation, emulation, and just the knowledge of all this stuff. What, maybe Nintendo's going to be a hell of a lot more careful now with making sure that their source codes are locked down tight, and that just some company doesn't have everything just sitting out there easily accessible. I'm not saying this was easily accessible, but maybe they'll have like some harder lockdowns on this kind of stuff. So there you go. My thoughts, feelings, looking at this a little bit. Let me know what you think. Do appreciate you guys hanging out with me. And with that said, I will catch y'all next time. Peace out. Bye-bye and boom. Bye.